Joining us on the Mercedes-Benz Vans phone line is a man who I reached out to this very morning to say, we got to talk, man. You got to help me out with this one. From Fox Sports and The Athletic, good friend of ours from the world of college athletics, is none other than Bruce Feldman back here on the show. How you doing, Bruce?
Busy day, Rich. But, kind of a mind-blowing last 18 hours in college football.
I mean, unbelievable. So I'll give you the floor, Bruce. What do you think of everything that happened?
I think Saban's choice of words using bought is obviously a head-turner. I think the fact that he had said that every player was bought, I think that probably is going to give Jimbo Fisher some plausible deniability of every player. No, every player was not bought. I think the thing you said a minute ago about he doesn't know what the collectives are, and he's claiming that. No way. That just doesn't add up, because the idea that we've done a lot of stories at The Athletic about collectives as well as NIL. By the way, NIL, and I've written about this a lot now, NIL, a lot of people think stands for now it's legal. That's what NIL stands for. And the idea that collectives, a bunch of random, rich people, would be identifying and spending six figures for some three-star defensive lineman, or without the coaching staff knowing it, hey, we're going to invest in a player that we think is good, but you guys may not feel the same way. That's preposterous. There's no way that happens. There's no way that happens. That they are talking, and this is a lot more into it now, where we're talking about there's a lot of agents. Some are attorneys who've gone in and they're shopping players around trying to get seven figures. The idea that Jimbo Fisher has not been privy to any of that, it's laughable, right? But the stuff Nick Saban said, and I tweeted this out this morning, and something I sent you, was one of the SEC coaches I talked to this morning was like, there used to be honor among thieves kind of mantra in the SEC. And basically what you've had in the last, half a day is the two most prominent coaches in the league are basically calling each other's wives fat in front of everybody, and it's just a wild twist in, and you ask people, I've asked people close to Nick Saban, I was like, what do you think happened last night? And the one person was like, I don't think, usually it's calculated. I don't know if this was exactly calculated as much as it was just like, in his head, he just said kind of like, bleep it, and just kind of like let it out there.
Yeah, I mean, we may have reached the part of Saban's career where he's out of wants to give. I don't know. So I guess a follow-up question for you on this, Bruce, is what happens? Like, what do you think Greg Sankey's thinking right now, the SEC commissioner? What do you think he's thinking? I think Greg Sankey probably isn't as happy about it as Paul Feinbaum is. Right.
The FCC has dominated college football and won so many national titles, and have, their mantra is it just means more, and it just means more of what, depends on who you talk to, right? And it's, there's always been an undercurrent. It's not just the SEC, but it's been heavily the SEC, right? And so for a long time, when Mike Slive, who, was really the conscience of college football and really was the godfather of the SEC, wanted the SEC's image to be cleaned up. And for the most part, it got polished up for a while. But it is now as much in the gutter after what we've just seen. And we've seen a lot of sparring with Jimbo Fisher and Lane Kiffin in the last few months. I mean, it's wild right now. And so, is it bad for business? I don't know. I mean, they're going to hold their nose. I think that the thing that people are probably going to look at is, all right, there's been all this stuff going on under the table. Now it's still kind of under the table, because it's like the NIL rules have given people cover, but it's gotten into inducements and different things, and the NCAA is a joke. The NCAA can't do anything about it. So it's just like, all right, we're basically a professional league, and we're better at it, and we're more resourced at it than anybody else in college sports. And, I think Greg Sankey has not been shy about saying, we're the ones who have the keys to the kingdom. We're the ones who run the sport. We're the ones who bring in the most money and certainly the most championships. And I don't know if he sits there and thinks at the end of the day, for the most part, they've tried to have their cake and eat it too. And I think this just kind of threw out some of the dirty laundry that's been bubbling beneath the surface, and it just exploded this morning.
Bruce Feldman here on the Rich Eisen Show. And if Saban wanted to bring attention to this, he sure did. And outside of what Kirby Smart, the two coaches to call out for it that might garner the most attention, I guess Lincoln Riley might have been one, but a former assistant within the division, within the conference, and who beat him last year, not just on the field, but in recruiting, might be one. And Dion certainly is another to call him out, too.
That's another subplot to this. That's like Jimbo blew that one out of the water. Dion going off about, him getting the number one recruit in the country last year and Saban's allegations towards that. Given what happened, what Jimbo said this morning, it's just like it takes a lot to obscure Deion Sanders, but that's basically what Jimbo did.
Yeah, no doubt about that, and we're waiting to hear what Deion is saying or is going to say about all this. And then the question is any of this illegal? Right? There was a new ruling that came out from the Board of Governors just last week to try and remove boosterism from the collectives. Is any of this technically illegal, Bruce?
I think some of it, if they can trace, there people are up in arms about tampering. If you can find a paper trail on that, in the meetings that were kind of preceded that in Scottsdale 2 weeks ago, where most of college football leadership, other than the SEC and the ACC, were there, it was a hot topic, especially among, the Pac-12, the Big Ten, about tampering and, hey, we're going to check people's phone records, and if you have burner phones, that means you're basically guilty, and that kind of thing. I don't doubt that there has been a lot of things that have gotten blurred, and just, the hard part of this is what may be against NCAA rules may not hold up in court. You're going to get all sorts of antitrust. A lot of these collectives, have tried. I'm not saying all of them, but a bunch of them have run things through compliance and have tried to really see what the state laws are saying and what are giving them cover to do. And so it's very murky on that. But I don't doubt that there's been a bunch of stuff where, either boosters or some coaches have been blatantly breaking rules. It's just who's going to catch them and how are they going to be, and what's going to happen to them, right? Out of the Pac-12 meetings, it was basically discussed, look, we're not going to try to be punishing 17-year-old kids or their families. We're really more maybe going to be fining schools and maybe suspending coaches if they've been part of that. And it's just a lot of wink, wink, nod, nod that's been going on, I think, behind the scenes, just like, the aspect of Jimbo telling people, oh, yeah, we don't know what our collective's doing. That's, it's like that just doesn't make sense. It's just not, it's not realistic to think that that's what's happening.
Bruce Feldman here from Fox Sports and The Athletic on the Rich Eisen Show. And so let's talk about the future. And my buddy and our friend Jay Billis has already chimed in, and I knew what he would say. He's been saying it: free market, the whole damn thing, right? And this just shows you it does level the playing field. Alabama isn't the top recruiting class. Jackson State is being talked about as a peer, regardless of whether the allegations are true. That free market will actually show the way. And that's the way it is in our economy, in our world. And it should be that way for college athletics. And you hear many different coaches lament NIL, period. And in between is somewhat potentially the future. What do you think the future is? Is it just staying the course and figuring everything out for yourself and everybody calling each other out? Or is it maybe what Gene Smith of Ohio State throughout as quote unquote just throwing stuff out that select teams come together under the college football playoff banner and create their own super league. What do you think?
I mean, it could get to that. I think one of the most interesting aspects of this to me is going to be, I've talked to a lot of coaches in the last week and a half, and one of the things that's really come up is the agents are really driving this, and that part has gotten, as they see it, out of control. And okay, what is out of control when it relates to college football recruiting? Because that's a big field to cover with a lot of minefields in it. And as the discussion of this is, are players being tampered with? Well, what's really seems to be going on a lot is agents will shop players around saying, hey, I got a guy, what would you pay for him? And that's before the kid is in the portal. And those discussions are going on. Now, what adds to that is agents have seen, and I'm just talking in the last 4 months, hey, we can get $6-8 million contract for a high school recruit who's not even a senior yet. He may have ability. He may have been ranked a 4- or 5-star player. And a lot of these programs, and look, it's not a coincidence. Texas A&M has a lot of money, and there's a lot of desperation. They've had one really good season in 50 years. So, there's desperation there. There's desperation at a place like Tennessee. They've fallen from relevancy. So those money people are going to try to go all in, and they're basically hoping their 7-figure, recruit is going to be Cam Newton for them, which in reality is, as much as the hype is for those guys, the average, hit rate in the last 10 years on those 5-star quarterbacks is actually about 30%. In terms of 30% turn out to be close to what they are. I'm not talking about they turn out to be Cam Newton. They turn out to be, big time players. The rest turn out to fizzle out. That's before you put all the money on them and all the expectations and all the other stuff that's going to come with it. So I think what's going to be really interesting to see is when all these big contracts get put on for a handful of players, how does it impact those kids? How does it impact the programs? Because everybody inside those programs know it. So you may sign a quarterback for 7 figures who's maybe making triple what your starting quarterback's making. How does that going to work out? So there's just a lot of stuff that I don't think anyone really knows how it's going to play, because logic doesn't always dictate what happens with money people when you put in ego and desperation on top of it.
Well, then it's going to take a lawsuit. I just don't know who's going to file it.
Lots of lawsuits. Agents, collective, big money people usually have big money attorneys to try to back them.
Well,
maybe they're going to be right, maybe they're going to be wrong. But the NCAA's lost a lot.
Right. Well, the reason what I'm bringing, I'm forgetting the NCAA. I think they're in over their heads. I mean, you saw how much money they've wasted on lawsuits that they've lost. Right. I mean, they're finished. Honestly, they're finished. They've already been told they're irrelevant by the Supreme Court and to watch their step. You're already seeing everybody just do whatever the hell they want to do anyway. The school presidents have their heads in the sand when it comes to this sort of thing. So the reason why I'm bringing up what will bring some change is something that Nick Saban literally just said, and then some kid suing a school because he didn't get fully paid. And the reason why he didn't get fully paid is because he left for a transfer portal because he didn't get what was promised on the field and what was promised off the field, and lay everything bare in discovery. And that's what I'm thinking. I'm just trying to think ahead here as to where this is all going, because nobody knows, and that's obvious. And it's now ugly. There's just no other way to put it. Bruce.
Yeah, and the lawsuits are going to keep coming because I think it is a big money grab. There's a lot of people who were not connected to college football before, attorneys who've seen this opportunity, and they see, it's really an uncharted path. So all of a sudden now you have a bunch of agents who I'm not talking about agents like Jimmy Sexton agent, Drew Rosenhaus agent. I'm not saying that those guys won't get involved in, in marketing aspect of some of those NFL firms. But what you have is a lot of people who were never in this space before, and they're looking at it going, wait a minute, this kid's rated as a 5-star. I can get him on a plane to 7 programs who I think are desperate or have money. and let's see how high I can get them to jump. And those kinds of things, when people are trying to police it and rein it in, it's just kind of a recipe for chaos. And I don't want to say a recipe for disaster, because I don't think, I don't want to, put, the judgment on it or whatever, because I feel like the system was so tilted the wrong way for so long. It's just, I think you're going to see a lot of people trying to get their pound of flesh in this.
I agree. Chaos is a perfect word for it. And again, that's why I think a bunch of schools will not appreciate the chaos. Certainly school presidents won't. And then because it lends to way too much economic uncertainty as to how much money is required to have a football program that's successful. You can't depend on it. You can't budget for it. You can't do anything like that, which is why a bunch of schools are going to get together and say, let's just play ourselves and screw everybody else. I honestly think that's the way this is going, Bruce. That's the way I go.
Look, and you have, go back to the Reggie Bush scandal. My colleague at Fox now, by the way. Go back to the Reggie Bush scandal at USC.
That's like quaint now.
Down on them
That's quaint.
so hard.
Yeah.
So hard on them after. And it was not to keep Reggie Bush in school, by the way.
Right.
It was tied to, after. But like the USC, a lot of USC money people were like, hey, we should just go away from the NCAA and we'll do our own thing. And at that point, it just seemed like so out of left field. I'm not saying there got any traction to that, but there was a lot of chatter amongst USC people about that. I think we're way closer to that now than we ever were, for a bunch of stuff, for a bunch of reasons. And there's TV money there that, we see it in terms of, this better than anybody. Networks are desperate for programming and everything, and there's a lot of interest, not NFL interest, but there's a lot of interest in college football.
There certainly will be on October 8th. That's for sure, which is when Texas A&M and Alabama play each other. Bruce, thank you for the time. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, Rich. Thanks for having me.
Right back at you. I follow Bruce Feldman on Twitter. You should as well. Just a great follow, a great fountain of information, and I appreciate him calling in. Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.